Good evening and welcome to the Fourth Estate. I am Rita Kanya, and this evening we take a look at the eye view of a journalist. I am joined by Ben Jumbe. He is a journalist at KFM, and today we take a look at a few events from last week. Welcome to Fourth Estate.
Thank you, Rita, and good evening, viewers.
Now we start off the conversation, Ben, with taking a look at MPs, the OTT tax, the over-the-top tax. One thing that as a number of viewers who are watching have had a hard time adjusting to, just getting to pay that 6,000 per month, or just getting to pay the 200 shillings daily. When first came, news broke of it in 2018, a number of people couldn't believe that this was happening. And now, within Parliament, something is definitely changing on that end. Given that the Parliamentary Commission awarded a contract to MTN Uganda to offer telecom services to MPs through their iPads. Now, the services would include the payment of OTT and internet bundles worth over 197 million per year. Is this the same house that passed the law? A number of people are wondering. Now, those same lawmakers, the MPs say now taxpayers are tasked with paying it on behalf of the MPs while paying their own tax. Yes, your own plus theirs and the internet bundles that you already have a burden with. A section of the MPs and the Commission insist that this is fair since the iPads belong to the Parliament and they are only facilitated to carry out their job. Can she win? A number of people are wondering. If you're wondering, who is that? The Speaker of Parliament. She says she will fight to block this move. So we see a bit of a disagreement within Parliament. You have covered it. You have had the side of it. What do you see from your end, Ben?
Thanks very much. To begin with, I think it was very unfortunate to have our lawmakers coming up with such a decision, knowing that they were the very people that chose to pass such a law that most Ugandans were against. Many Ugandans felt disappointed that Parliament could even think of having ordinary Ugandans pay OTT, which was going to make life harder for them because some of them live below, the poverty line. They struggle to have a meal a day. So if you get to ask them to pay extra for this internet, yet government is struggling to make more Ugandans access internet, get phones, connectivity, human rights. These days, communication is like a right. Internet is a human right now. So if you put such a law, then you're disenfranchising or discouraging, making Ugandans miss out on a right that is really basic for them. So it was really, really disappointing. It's brought in several concerns from various stakeholders. They feel probably these are not the very people that passed the law just a few months ago, last year. It was really disappointing because these are the very people. Looking at last year, they are the very people that wanted their allowances exempted from tax, and they fought hard until they succeeded. So having this would make a Ugandan believe or think we have some selfish individuals in that house.
But then if we're talking about those individuals and we bring in the Speaker who is here saying, no, you should pay for your own tax at this point in time, this is something you can be able to afford. Do we say we have the Speaker speaking on behalf of each and every person within the public on that?
I think someone is fooling someone.
Who do you think is fooling who?
Because when the Speaker addressed the media, she said, as head of the Parliament Commission, she didn't. That was not a unanimous decision, like they had not sat and agreed about such a thing. And then when we hear another commissioner coming out to say what we are talking about was, an agreed position, then I think something is not right in the 10th Parliament.
But if we say that something is not right, this eventually is going to have an effect. It's going to actually have a huge effect in terms of the economy, because if this goes ahead, the blocking of this would actually mean that there's a lawsuit looming if the telecom decides to sue for unfair termination of a business contract. So at the end of the day, we see that there are economic consequences that come with whatever comes out of Parliament each and every single day, and who is holding them accountable for that.
But you see, before you come up with any decision or any law, you must think ahead. We've always been told it's important to think before you act, but in some cases it appears some people act before they think. So in this case, they should have known that before going up with getting to sign this contract, there are ramifications, there are consequences if things backfire. But we have the confidence that probably the Speaker will do as she promised to take it to another level and try to see that this doesn't get through.
Okay, but going back to the speaker, when you mentioned the fact that when she was addressing the media, she came out with something else altogether, and the question continues to be who's bluffing who. You know, a number of times they will say that when the elephants fight, the grass suffers.
Yes.
In this case, the citizenry.
I know, but this is not the first time the citizens are suffering. And I think many Ugandans have come to believe that some of our members of parliament think about themselves, not about the people. When I had one of the commissioners speak and say, we need this money because we are serving the people. The iPads we got, it is the taxpayer that paid to have these things. But then if you're serving the citizens, then you shouldn't just carry all the load on them. You should ensure you serve. Sometimes service requires sacrifice. We don't have to do everything for them. Otherwise, I'm scared soon we may have to pay for something more than just OTT. And
we're already paying. A number of people would say a lot is already being paid for at that point in time.
True.
But with all the news that has come out, what are the people saying?
Well,
what do the people see?
I think the people are very disappointed because, to begin with, they haven't yet embraced the whole issue of OTT. They still think it was a bad idea to have such a law in place and making Ugandans pay this. You may look at 200 shillings as something very small, but to some people, it is hard to get. They may not get it in a week or a month. So if you ask someone who is well positioned and they're asking the already impoverished or already struggling Ugandan to pay for them, then I think it's not fair. So many of them are disappointed. They feel these guys are just working for their own stomachs and working to satisfy their own interests. I think that is not service. If you're thinking of service, then what comes to your mind is what people want, because we've seen many of them using these iPads, but really, before the 10th parliament, didn't we have members of parliament in there? Weren't they serving? Did they need Ugandans to pay for them OTT? Well, it hadn't come, but did they need Ugandans to pay for them such services? So I think it's really unfair and unfortunate because is the 10th parliament the best performing? How did the others do or carry out their roles without putting that whole burden on the citizens or the voters?
Okay. You talk about is the 10th parliament performing? And we do know at the end of last month, actually, there was a report that was released that did highlight the fact that it is not really performing to the standards that it should be. And you mention and you continue to mention unfair. It's not fair, it's unfair. What is fair? What would be fair? Because at the end of the day, they are our leaders. They serve us.
I think what's fair is what benefits the ordinary Ugandan. Whatever decision is taken has to be in the best interest of the ordinary Ugandan who elected them to go and represent them in parliament, because we are over now 40 million people in Uganda. So you don't have enough space for all the 40 to get in there, but we have opportunity to elect people that can represent us. I know some people have said the number is already too big, over 450. It's beyond. Some are suggesting we need to even reduce it further. And I think maybe that could be one way to go forward. Otherwise, at this rate, I'm scared we'll keep suffering as ordinary Ugandans.
Do we see the numbers reducing?
Well, many times it comes through amendment of, the constitution or the laws. So it may be hard because the very people that it concerns are affected. I'm sure many of them would not buy such an idea.
Okay, but we do know that the road to 2021 is right around the corner for a number of people. They're gearing to that. Everyone eyeing the seat. And you mentioned that we vote these members of parliament into their seats at the end of the day.
You've had many citizens sometimes actually during the news here saying, well, we voted for this guy. He has not served to our expectations. So please be sure we won't vote you back come 2021. And I think many are serious. They've learned, because during campaigns, people come with all sorts of pledges, commitments. I'll do this, do the other. And when they get there, probably they realize they spent a lot during the campaigns and they have to, get their money back.
And that
so
is
many of them are probably there to get back what they lost during the campaigns.
So we need to, as you seem to be speaking, is that we need to go back to a system, maybe adopt a few things from earlier on in the years.
Yeah.
What would be those things that we're adopting?
I think for Ugandans, it's important that you get to look at the person coming to you, uh, promising heaven and earth when they're seeking your vote. It's important that you get to find out what they can do beyond just the money, because concerns have been raised over the commercialization of politics in the country, where someone comes, as long as the voters are given money, then that person goes through. Not that they have the quality of a good leader, but as long as the ordinary Ugandan gets maybe a bar of soap or a kilo of sugar, then they're ready to sell their vote. That is something probably that has put us in the state where we are right now.
Everyone is out to get some money. Everyone is looking for who will be best be suited to actually give them what they're asking for.
One who has more money is the one that gets there.
Yes, but it goes back to the society, becoming more and more commercialized. And this is where we see what is happening with OTT at this point in time. Things are changing. We can't ask for us to go backwards, yet the world continues to move forward.
You see, when making a law, it would be really absurd to come up with a piece of legislation and at the end of it, you choose to get out of it. Well knowing that you could have thought about all these considerations before even allowing such a law to pass. So what were they thinking when the law was passed last year?
Well, what they were thinking was the fact that they were trying to widen the tax base at this point in time.
Probably some of them had in mind that at a particular point to jump off the ship.
So it wasn't
and
for
the
them.
ordinary Ugandan will still suffer.
Okay, but then
I still think it is a bad idea.
You still think it's a bad idea?
It is a bad idea.
Later, a few months, actually close to almost a year shy of when it was actually passed. But one thing that we even go back to at this point in time as a country, the citizenry. We're here complaining, saying OTT, we're struggling to pay it. Now we have to pay for the MPs. A number of people have said that on social media. But also it goes back to the fact that how many are actually using the OTT bit of things? A number of people have chosen to go for the VPN situation. And one will say with these platforms, where are we being patriotic as Ugandans?
No, I think sometimes, even in some government installations, we've seen some people recently when we had that case of Chadona East Member of Parliament, concerns were raised on Facebook over that facility using VPN. People were wondering how a government facility probably would be using VPN and not paying OTT. But it happens, even if you get to some of these people actually in their offices or homes or where, many of them are not paying. Some of them are not paying, meaning, well, it is not a good idea. It is good to pay tax, but then it should cut across. It shouldn't segregate. It shouldn't, favor some and, affect others. The burden shouldn't be imposed on just a particular individual.
Well, we had the State Minister of Foreign Affairs mention the fact that Ugandans do not pay taxes.
No, I think Ugandans pay tax, but it's
you do in terms of pay as you earn. A number of times, people, yes, indirect taxes, we're paying it whenever you buy something, you're paying it.
Buy your bottle of water,
you're paying
sugar.
Yes. Now you're forced to buy it every time. Maybe you want to use the social media platforms, but you don't want to use VPN. But for that particular person who makes their mind up and says, I'm going to actually go and pay my pay as you earn, without being reminded or without waiting for when it will come to them, and this is what Uganda Revenue Authority is saying they need to pay.
When you look at pay as you earn, actually you have no choice. The moment your money comes, that is already deducted.
Actually, for a number of people, Ben,
Ugandans had an opportunity, probably they would not pay that.
Because, for a number of employers right now, they're choosing to do this, which is they give you a service contract. You have to pay your own pay as you earn. We have a number of situations like that right now within our country. So it is up to you, the person who's receiving the money, to go ahead and pay your tax.
That would be really hard.
So exactly. And you see, it saves them.
It's not easy to pay tax, by the way.
It's why.
Sometimes Ugandans feel their money is being wasted or not being put to proper use. So one would wonder, why am I still paying tax? Say, for example, if the road in that particular area is not worked on, probably they don't have water, health services in their area are not good. So they keep wondering. We've had teachers, we've had health workers calling for, more money, more salary, and So you wonder if the taxes cannot help in such important things, then why would you think of paying OTT for your legislator?
Okay. Well, right now at this point in time, when we think of why should we do it with a contract now being awarded, and in case if at all they choose to terminate it, by the parliament terminating it, it will have some consequences. So if at all this doesn't happen and we have to pay, where would you see a country going forward?
No, I think before I answer that, the guys in parliament have the power. Recently, we had Minister of Finance and Honorable Gabriel Ajedra said, well, sometimes they're also tied. Their hands are tied. These people have all the right. They determine the salary they get. They determine some of all these, benefits. So it's hard. So until the law is changed, then we may still have to suffer from such issues.
Okay, so as we talk about the law being changed, what would happen to our country going forward if at all we do not see this law being changed?
I think we'll continue seeing Ugandan suffering at the hands of the powerful, Ugandan suffering at the hands of, those in power, and not service leaders, because I think Uganda needs servant leaders, people that are in office to serve the population, but not those that get there to seek their own, selfish benefits and, what they want. Probably people get there and they're like, well, I spent a lot during the campaigns. It's my time to reap back. Remember, there's someone who said, well, I'm requesting for your votes that I get there and I also enjoy. So why would you bring back such a person? But the person was honest, at least for that person. The legislator was honest. He told his voters, please vote me to parliament. I also want to eat.
Yes, and we have had them be very honest
And
about
the voters
this.
were very happy. They said, okay, let's give a man to eat. But after a few months, they're like, no, I think it was wrong.
So you have been in the media industry for 10 years. You have covered, and when you mentioned servant leaders, have we seen any? Because we can be so quick to point out those that have failed, but have we seen any that we can say this is an example, or do we continue to say all tomatoes are bad and there's no good tomato anywhere?
No, I wouldn't be really particular. I know there are good servant leaders in the country, but there are very few.
Okay, well, we're going to take a short break as Fourth Estate, but when we return, we're also going to be getting into something else, the Electoral Commission, talking about. Welcome back to Fourth Estate. And now we take a look at the Electoral Commission. Part of the weekend and also the end of the week did have a lot to do with the Electoral Commission, a number of conversations revolving about them, warning all political aspirants and political groups to refrain from engaging in active campaigns, meetings, addressing rallies, putting up posters, distributing campaign materials, and soliciting for votes. Now, this did raise questions on how will the consultations be covered and the rallies. And altogether, one wondering, where does this leave meetings by the president, where he was meeting various district leaders and indicating that they're endorsing him for yet another term of office. And also from social media still, where it seems that a number of people seem to find their voice of late, some saying, what is going on at this point in time? You have covered it, Ben. You have been seeing everything that has been going on. He was in the Lango sub-region, where he was also endorsed just this weekend and Friday as well. And we look and wonder, the Electoral Commission is saying this, but we see our president doing this.
Well, some people have argued that it's hard sometimes to separate between the two persons, the person of the president and the NRM national chairman. He's the president of the Republic of Uganda, and whatever he's doing at the moment, we're meant to understand he's doing the same in that capacity as the head of state. But the message from the Electoral Commission was to all aspiring candidates, those seeking elective positions in the various, positions. We have presidential, parliamentary, and local council, not to engage in rallies. Of course, the commission was clear in their statement. It said that I'll just read something small. They said consultative meetings and campaigns can, however, take place internally within political parties and organizations where their internal constitutions provide for such a process to choose the party flag bearers for various elected positions. So they're saying the consultative meetings can be held within, those party frameworks, but they don't want to see people beginning to conduct rallies under the guise of having consultative meetings. But of course, it's already started. I think the many of those having hopes of contesting for various positions believe if they wait for 2021, it will be late, or if they wait, because the Electoral Commission launched the roadmap last year, towards the end of last year. So it is clear the dates are set when the campaigns will start, the nominations will start. So at the moment, the Commission is not aware of any candidate until nominations are done.
Yes, and the Commission did mention that bit of it. But when you talk about the separation between the person of the President and the NRM chairman, one thing comes to mind, because while the Electoral Commission was issuing these guidelines, they did mention this, the Section 3 of the Presidential Elections Act 2005, which provides for aspirants to consult in preparation for nominations. These consultations, however, should be distinguished from campaigns, holding rallies, meetings, and canvassing and soliciting for votes. Now, one would say, is it the people on this other end that are confusing the two terms?
The question is, what is a campaign, or rather, what is a rally?
Yes, what do we see as a rally? What do we see as a campaign?
I can choose, I think I could choose to say this is a consultative meeting, but then I get to engage my people. What is a rally? It is about rallying people towards what you believe and maybe seeking support to contest for any position you want. So I think it's a tricky position, because those others that are contesting are wondering. They're like, if we wait, the NRM chairman is already campaigning. So if we wait,
but then we have the act.
But I mean, he's not. Does he ever get anywhere and say, I'm campaigning or I'm holding a rally? But he has rallies after major events, rather major activities, probably launch of a road, a bridge, water system. The other day he was in Koboko, launched a water system, and some IT system.
Fiber.
Yeah, and he was also endorsed to that side. So I think it's quite a tricky position. The politicians, the other side, believe maybe the law is not fair, but he's not getting there as the NRM chairman. He's getting there as the president, and after that, then he gets to address the nation about what government has done, what government is doing. So it's hard. How will you really separate? Will you tell him
So
now,
who gets
put
to
up
celebrate
the heart of the president and talk as the NRM chairman? It's tricky. It is a hard nut to crack.
But then who gets to separate it? Because is it the media that has to cover it a certain type of way? Is it you who has to mention that this is not a campaign when you report a story? How do you go ahead to distinguish the two? Or just for an ordinary citizen?
No, I think it's hard. Everyone just needs to use what they have, everything within their means to do what will take them where they want to be. There's a time people were suggesting that actually we need to have, maybe close to the campaigns, we need to have the president losing out some of the benefits so that we can have a level play field. Because if he's having, all this number of escorts, he's having, all these vehicles, all these security detail, and then these other people just have a few, then probably the level is not, the ground is not leveled. But it's really tricky, and I think it can be addressed now. I don't know, probably it needs a law or something, but it gets tricky. You won't stop him. He's the head of state. He has to, work must move on. He has to do this. He made this week and last week and this week, we're having the NRM Manifesto Week, where we have various ministries talking about the achievements, as far as they've gone in terms of the manifesto and the commitments made by the NRM. So when he gets that opportunity, gets to a place and probably launches a water system, it says this was one of the pledges I made during the 2016 campaigns, ahead of the 2016 elections. So it's a good thing for him and for the NRM party. But for the others, well, they find it's not fair. So
Another one, the entire bit that we have been able to talk about this, the word unfair, it's not fair, it's not fair. And a number of people will say, if the ground is not level, then find a way of leveling it your own way. Don't wait for the laws. Just maybe you need to put in more effort, more work in some places.
I think it's the reason members of the opposition are calling for electoral reforms. They want and members of the civil society, they believe something must change if we are to have free and fair elections. The commission has been straight. It has promised free and fair elections, but it also, during the launch of that roadmap, said there is need for some of these reforms that were, recommended by the Supreme Court if the country is to have free and fair elections the year 2021.
But a number of, this is not the first time we're hearing of these electoral reforms. Even from as far back as 2015, there was a call to have the Electoral Commission be fair as possible, not having it with any interference in whatsoever way. Do we need a balanced electoral commission besides just all the electoral reforms, but having a balanced electoral reforms? A number of a number of people have seen, we have seen the change within the electoral commission. Is it the change of the people? Is it the change of the system that's needed? Because if we are going to do electoral reforms, even the commission itself, a few things have to change within it. Is it the individuals?
Last week, the Attorney General was expected to present these reforms from government, but then he told Parliament he could not because of the Court of Appeal ruling. They are delayed. So he said they were waiting. They were waiting for They were waiting for the ruling for them to move. But he promised that I think before the end of this month they'll have to bring in these reforms. But I think the opposition also is still hell bent that without these reforms, the much needed reforms, we may not have, the country may not be able to get free and fair elections. That's why they're still pushing that these reforms are brought in quite early to enable a smooth, running of the process.
Again, while we talk about the opposition, taking it back to the Electoral Commission, which while it gave these guidelines, did mention this particular thing. They're concerned with the increase in the number of persons aspiring for various elective positions within the general elections 2021. Very, very worried. And they said they have started conducting these public meetings already, supposedly to consult the electorate in the preparation of their candidature in 2021. Earlier, you mentioned the fact that everyone is panicking. Everyone seems to want to get to 2021 while in 2019.
I think everyone has a right to contest for any position they feel like, and maybe the challenge is there is need to wait for that particular time, but you may not be sure. If you know you are having a rally, like say in a marathon or something, and before the person allowing you to get started kicks you off, and one of your competitors chooses to run before, it gets tricky. You won't wait for the whistle to move. You also find yourself running. So I think that is what many others believe. If I wait for the very last time, I may lose out. That's why they need to start early. Consulting doesn't hurt, but then people are using various, means. They can do door to door, and you can even get to start talking to friends, talking to them about your ambition. I could be here telling you, you know what, I'm planning to come 2021. Many are doing this. They do various projects, get to places, and maybe put up a water source, buy an ambulance, and it's all forms of. It's a bit tricky, but I think we have to deal with it. We have to just bear with it.
Bearing, and what about the citizen being alert and knowing now everything that is coming their way? They need to be giving more of a look of, am I sure this is coming from a genuine place?
That's what I said. I think citizens need to be more careful about the choice of leaders that they send to Parliament.
Should we go with the honest ones who tell us, this is what I want to actually achieve? I promise you this and I promise you this. And someone simply tells you, I want to eat.
No, I think you'd rather go with such a person than one who promises heaven and earth and delivers nothing. So I think they just need to find out people that are mindful of their interests, who are very few, by the way, at the moment, and choose such people. Otherwise, it would be tricky. We'll have many more people getting in there, and I can guarantee you, I think moving forward, we'll have more people getting to parliament and all these other positions just to satisfy themselves, really.
Okay, and when we talk about, you keep saying we're waiting, the electoral reforms, we're waiting. Also with all that we'd want perhaps from the Electoral Commission, or even just as a member of parliament who is waiting for the next term, and he's starting his work. For one who's eyeing the seat as well, there's all this waiting. But then there are a number of people who are unhappy with the system and have taken to maybe riots, just deciding to march once in a while and saying on this day we're going to march. And now that we have the Electoral Commission saying that this disruptive nature of processions that they keep having, they're choosing to have them conduct these processions on roads that are not public. Yes? But would we see them serving the purpose that these processions usually do? And what does that mean?
I think when it gets to the issue of processions and whatnot, we all know sometimes if they're carried out on maybe busy streets or roads, they tend to disrupt the traffic flow and whatnot. But then the people also believe they must get to such roads so that they can get the attention they need. As long as they're not breaking any law, as long as they're not hurting anyone, I think they feel they can do that and then get what they desire rather.
In comes the Public Order Management Act.
Now that one, like we've had actually the Prime Minister last week when I was meeting members of IPOD, he asked the police officers to implement the law as it is at the moment. They believe he believes that the law in itself is a very good law, although some other people think otherwise. But he says the problem is with the people implementing the law. We have the problem is with the police officers who probably didn't get enough sensitization about some of the sections of the law and are using it to like infringe on the rights of these other people carrying out various political activities. But it says it should be implemented in the current form as they get to address some of the concerns.
Well, if we're talking about all of this that's happening, you could say that maybe this is what we need to go with. But when you listen to the fact that the police at this point in time may not know what the law is, yes, we have members of parliament, when we look at the report on their performance, also not being able to achieve on a number of just the targets, the bare minimums when it comes to passing laws and looking at a few things within parliament and their day-to-day runnings within the parliament. Who do we see actually being able to do their job and doing it right?
I think actually recently we had government coming up with a small committee to look through this law again, to look through some of the contentious issues that I think this will be actually one of the issues that will be addressed during the IPOD summit sitting tomorrow. So I think they already know the contentious issues. The biggest was the issue of having anyone who intends to hold a meeting notifying the IGP, who doesn't sit everywhere but at the police headquarters. So if you have a rally, say in Lira or Arua, you must deliver your letter to the headquarters. So I think that is one of the areas that they're thinking of changing to ensure that it's made much easier. But then, yes, members of the opposition and other politicians say the law doesn't say that they must seek maybe permission from police, but rather notify them about these meetings. But that we've seen has been handled differently, where they're told, well, you didn't get permission from police, so you won't hold this rally. That's why sometimes they've decided to just go ahead.
Yeah. Well, now that we have that law on that end, we look at the law, and also we now have the guidelines from the Electoral Commission. We now wonder if the people will adhere, if the given parties in here will adhere, because that's also another thing to look at.
Well, I think Ugandans know the law. The politicians know. The politicians remain a politician, and that they have their missions, they have their ambitions. So if anything seems to like put them away from their plans or intended objectives or mission, then they won't go by it. And for politicians, if he believes he needs to achieve a certain goal, he'll go for it no matter what.
Okay.
So if I plan to have my rally and I've notified you as the law says, you won't stop me.
Okay, so we're going to take a short break, but Fourth Estate continues shortly. Still taking a very keen focus on the Fourth Estate and how things were covered within the media in the past week. Another bit was the Border 2010 patron, Abdallah Kitatta. He came to limelight, and when he did, it wasn't all with the best. Very unfortunate stories was told, and one thing, after over a year of remand, he was convicted of possession of arms and war materials and sentenced to 8 years, 8 months, and 6 days. Now, the matter attracted increasing concern. There are some who felt that Kitatta was jailed on a light matter and that there are more serious crimes that he committed, including obstruction of justice, aggravated assault, and how would there be a chance of him to actually win a case on appeal? Well, Ben, you being in the media from the start of this, all that was shared about him, and the eventual conviction that happened in the past week, what was it for you?
I think the conviction and sentence of Kitatta drew mixed reactions from members of the public. We had some thinking actually was given a lighter sentence. He deserved maximum sentence, while others felt, well, he was working on someone's orders. He shouldn't be punished. But then every day we should know that whatever you do, you have to carry your cross at some point. Whatever you do, you could have been instructed to do something, but as long as you know it is not within the law, then you must be ready to carry your own cross.
But when we say carrying your own cross, a number of people did express the fact that he shouldn't be carrying this cross alone. When he came into the media and all the stories that were told, there was more to just Abdallah Kitatta.
No, that's why I'm saying some people actually, especially the family members, were like, this guy has done a lot for the party. He was the NRM chairman, Rubaga Division, and he did a lot. He was seen everywhere. This week I saw someone posting on Facebook saying at some point he was like a lead car, you know. Yeah, but then seeing him in such a state, even the family members were like, he did a lot for government. It was disappointing that they would let him, you know, end up there. But you know, the law is the law. If you do anything outside the law, you can be shielded. No one is above the law. That is what you've been told.
You mentioned the fact
some people could be above the law, but principally, no one is above the law.
Now, you mentioned he did some things for the government. Yes, but there is the law in place. And there are a number of people, some would say, that continue to do these things. You know, and where do you draw the line and now say, I might be going with people who are in power at this point in time, but when the law comes in and steps in, you're left on your own?
I think to begin with, Kitatta, I should say, was always a good mobilizer. He did a lot for the NRM government, especially in Rubaga Division and everywhere. He had a following. He had several people believing in him. So in that aspect, he played his part. But then where he had his group allegedly, you know, battering other people, the members of his group, Border 2010, allegedly beating up other border people. We had a case where we had members of this group actually beating up school children. That was the worst, where people came out and were like, this must stop. The issue had to actually get to Parliament. People had to raise concern that Minister of Internal Affairs needed to come up and, you know, make a statement about this particular group because it was going beyond. So I think for such, I don't know if he was aware about such developments, about such happenings in the group, but, well, it happened. So in the end, it gets back to personal responsibility. Whatever you do, you must know that at some point you must be held accountable.
Okay, when we talk about being held accountable, outfits like this existing within our society, who do we hold responsible for, first of all, checking outfits like this, for making sure we don't have groups like Border 2010?
I think the groups are needed for various purposes. if you look at the political landscape, we have various groups. We have youth wings of almost every party, and we're having all these other vigilante groups that come close to elections, vowing to protect the votes of their candidates and whatnot. The Electoral Commission has always come out and said, we don't need these, we'll use the police constables to ensure this. But then they always come up with these. We've had several brigades coming up just out of necessity. You're like, okay, probably we had issues of our votes being, rigged, or votes, we need to address the issue of ballot stuffing. So we must have a team to protect our votes. So they, out of necessity, they just find themselves there. And
But
others are given. Other youth need money. So if there is anyone willing to pay, they will do anything.
But we all know that with such outfits, maybe the sole purpose is one particular thing, but eventually they start to divert. A number of times people will say, with such outfits comes all this power, all this praise. And then eventually things take a twist here and there.
No, I think you can't avoid that. If you've come up with your outfit for a particular purpose, and probably at some point it's met its objective, or say you had a group planning to protect your votes at the end of the elections, what happens to them? We had were they police, those village, could I call them village boys, that were helping police in ensuring security on the villages. What's the name? Yes, the crime preventers. At some point, when that time came to an end, people were wondering what happens next.
Yes, but also we know what the crime preventers came with, and all that came with the crime was not good.
Until government and until the president had to come and say, okay, we'll have to make them part of the reserve. I'm a reserve, then we'll have to move. Otherwise, at that point, everyone was scared. Was like, what happens after this? I mean, they came to do this. They've done a good job. Others have actually made the situation worse. So you'd wonder what happens to some of these groups. I think it gets back to the principle of probably leadership. You get to know if you've set up something, you must ensure you're in charge.
And if you're talking about being in charge, you mentioned the likes of the crime preventers. One thing is also the fact that arming these people, the likes of Kitatta, being armed, and what it causes eventually within the society. What do you give them to protect the society? What do you not give them? And what can we say they need? Because eventually when they say they're an outfit, this is the objective, and if the objective is to provide security, what kind of arms do you give them?
No, I think that also depends on the situation prevailing. Looking at now, recently we've had concerns raised over the LDUs. They've come on board after training, and they're all brandishing their new guns, shiny guns everywhere, and some of them have reportedly started harassing citizens, asking for money. A member of parliament last week raised an issue saying that in his area they were ordering people to close their shops by 8. You see, they feel they have the power, they have the gun, but then the ministry has said that the Ministry of Internal Affairs has promised to address such issues. And in any setting, in any group, you will have some bad elements. But just like you said earlier, they may all not be bad. There could be some good ones, but I think we need to have mechanisms to check the excesses in every area.
From our conversation and discussion this entire evening, I think one thing that keeps coming up is the mechanisms, the systems in place. A few things are lacking within our country when it comes to just even these outfits. And then where we see eventually, yes, a conviction, a sentence, but how many more have we not heard of? How many more are just on the rise of becoming the next?
Actually, someone this week was saying they were very disappointed that Kitatta ended up that way, because there are many people that have committed heinous crimes, that have committed murder, but they've not been arrested up to today. There are many prominent Ugandans that have been killed, and some of those people, some are probably known, but they've not been held accountable. They've not been apprehended. So some citizens feel probably the law is working for working against the less empowered, and protecting the big fish. Yeah. So, but I think overall, the law remains the law. So
Okay.
every Ugandan must be law abiding.
Yes, and perhaps the law should be able to make sure it's implemented for every Ugandan, big or small.
Someone said that we do not need to get good laws to restrain bad people, but we need to get good people to restrain us from bad laws. So I think, yeah, we need some good people.
Okay, let's wait and hopefully we'll have some good people in the near future.
Let's pray. So.
Okay, that has been the Fourth Estate this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I have been joined by Mr. Ben Jumbe. He is a journalist at KFM, and we have been taking a look at a number of events from the past week. Thank you so much for joining us on the Fourth Estate.
Pleasure.
Have a good night and a great week ahead.